Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for the 11th Annual DOE Office of Indian Energy Annual Program Review. This is the second one we've held virtually. We do hope that everyone is safe and healthy during these difficult times, although we will sort of miss the magic of being in person. We will hope that we can see everyone next year. Next slide, please. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Lizana Pierce. I have been in the energy development space for over 25 years now, and I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with Indian tribes and Alaska villages and tribal entities in their energy development for over 20 years. I am a mechanical engineer by degree and the deployment supervisor for DOE's Office of Indian Energy. In that position, I support the office by executing the deployment program, of course, with the staff, which we introduced yesterday. The deployment program is comprised of a three-pronged approach consisting of financial assistance through competitive grants, technical assistance at no cost to tribes and tribal entities, and an education and capacity building component. Additionally, I manage the national funding opportunity announcements and have acted as the project officer for many grants over the years. I also implement the outreach through our website and email newsletters, and oversee the support from our laboratory partners and our other TA providers. And if you missed yesterday, the first session, we did have an invocation by Bernadette Cutter from Ute Mountain Ute, and a welcoming from Director Johns, who introduced David Conrad as our Deputy Director for the office. Next slide, please. And besides a bunch of wonderful presentations on their projects, really gives you a sense of the tangible impacts the projects are making in the communities. Before we begin, let's go over some event details. The program review sessions are being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy website at energy.gov/Indian Energy. And in a couple of weeks, those recordings will be posted along with the slides to the Office of Indian Energy's website. You should receive a post-event email where the link of the page where those slides and recordings will be located. Because we are recording this, all phones have been muted. And I'll remind you that throughout the presentations, if you have questions, please type them into the question box in the control panel, and we will answer those questions after the final presentation today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tweety Doe to introduce herself and introduce the project presentations.
Thank you, Lizana. Hello, good morning and good afternoon to some people who may be on the Eastern time zone. My name is Tweety Doe, and I serve as the project officer, and I get to work with some of our grant recipients, including some of the projects that you hear about this morning. I have been with the Department of Energy for over 12 years and with the Office of Indian Energy for about a third of that time. And I've been very fortunate to be able to work with Lizana from this office, as well as my time at the Council of Energy Resource Tribes going back, gosh, I think it was about 2004. So Lizana, it's been wonderful working with you, and I've learned so much from you, and thanks for letting me tag along all these years. I appreciate so much the challenging and the hard work that all of you do to forward clean energy access in Indian country, and I feel very gratified when I am able to participate in your success. So let's jump into slide number 8. This program review is a reporting requirement for all of our grant recipients. Anyone who's receiving a grant from the Office of Indian Energy is required to make this annual review. It is intended to provide updates on your projects to us, especially important since our travel has been very limited in the last couple of years. And we want to hear about your successes. We want to learn from what you are successful in doing and the lessons that you've learned to help us, all of us, to not repeat some of those mistakes. And it's such a great opportunity when we are in person to network and to catch up on what's going on, in the past year. And I hope that next year we'll all be together again in person. And next slide, please. If you would go to, I believe it's slide 12. Perfect. Session 4. So welcome to session 4, our first session of today. We've got 4 projects, 2 of them from Colusa, then Oglala Sioux and Bishop Paiute. First on deck here is Colusa. Ken Allman, who's the co-gen director for the Colusa Indian Community Council, will be presenting on 2 projects. The first is the Housing Energy Connection Project, which is to expand the tribal utility electric service to tribal homes and facilities. And the second project is the Solar Canopy Expansion Project to install about 507 kilowatts of solar PV that are integrated on the parking lot canopies. Ken, you are on.
Hello. Hopefully my audio is working well. Thank you, Tweety. So my name is Ken Allman, and I am the now the Tribal Utility Authority Director for the Colusa Indian Community Council in Colusa, California. This is the second year for a pair of projects that were approved for Department of Energy funding. So I'll be discussing the background on each of these projects and where they each sit now. Next slide, please. This slide is just a quick outline of the presentation. I'll give a brief summary of the tribe that I represent, provide descriptions of both projects, explain our location and the project participants, and finally give an update on where the projects currently sit. Next slide, please. So the Colusa Indian community consists of over 150 members residing in the heart of Northern California's agricultural land on a 290-acre reservation along the Sacramento River, about 4 miles north of the Colusa city limits on Highway 45. The CICC owns and operates the Colusa Casino Resort, which is powered by the Tribal Utility Authority's cogeneration plant. And the TUA's microgrid provides highly reliable power to the casino and hotel resort, as well as tribal administration buildings, water and wastewater treatment facilities, a medical clinic, various ag loads, and several homes. Next slide. The Housing Power Project, that's what we're calling it, the first project, expanded existing underground medium voltage distribution to more than 30 homes, a daycare, a mechanical shop, some irrigation pumps, and a sewer lift station, which all received electric service from PG&E. As part of the project, AMR, or automatic meter reading, and AMI, advanced metering infrastructure, were also installed to allow the tribe to set up its own electric metering. Next slide, please. The Solar Canopy Expansion Project is a solar PV system integrated with a carport canopy in the parking lot to the east of the casino and just north of the existing parking canopy system. The new canopy is rated at 507.6 kW DC or 448 kilowatts AC. This project interconnected with the existing tribal-owned microgrid generation system at medium voltage and uses existing electrical infrastructure from the existing parking lot canopy solar system in order to reduce system costs. Next slide, please. Here's a map showing the reservation's location in relation to the surrounding area. So we are in Colusa County in Northern California, just a few miles north of a small town called Colusa, which itself is about an hour north of Sacramento. On the right, you'll see a Google Earth image that details the bulk of the project location. Next slide, please. So this is what we refer to as the new reservation, which is where the majority of the tribe's housing exists and where the bulk of this housing power project work was completed. Next slide. The red lines on this image
Ken, if you're still speaking, we can't hear you. Ken, we still can't hear you if you're still.
I'm sorry. Did it cut out?
You're back. Yes, now
Yes.
you're back. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure where I left off. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. So I guess I'll just repeat where I started. So on this image, you'll see the red lines, and these show several, more of the several miles of medium voltage cabling that was installed for this project in order to provide power to several loads at the far end of the new reservation. Next slide, please. So again, the red lines on this map indicate the path of the new medium voltage infrastructure, and you can see here several of the homes that are now powered by the Tribal Utility Authority in this image. Next slide, please. And again, so there you see the red lines showing the route of the medium voltage cabling, and these homes pictured here are at the end of the line of our microgrid and sit against the levee that borders the Sacramento River. Next slide, please. This is an image that details the proposed solar canopy expansion project location. So to the right, you'll see 4 blue boxes, and those represent the new canopies just to the north of the 4 existing canopies. And to the left, you'll see much of the casino resort, and at the top left is the tribe's cogeneration plant. Next slide, please. The primary business contact for these projects has been the tribe's chairman, Daniel Gomez, while I have served as the primary technical contact. Electrical engineering was provided by Andrew Humphrey Engineering out of Golden, Colorado. The solar carport structure and related equipment were all provided by SunPower, and labor was provided by Jevedon Industrial out of Red Bluff, California. Next slide, please. So the objective of the housing power project is to provide less expensive and more reliable electricity to the tribe for its members' homes and commercial, agricultural, and industrial facilities than PG&E can provide. Over the 30-year expected lifespan of this project, we anticipate savings of nearly $9.5 million. But equally important is the fact that this will take members' money away from PG&E and give it back to the tribe's Economic Development Corporation for future economic development. Next slide, please. The solar canopy expansion project costs about $2.3 million and will generate around $5.2 million in savings. It will reduce carbon emissions by approximately 10,000 tons of CO2 over the life of the project. And it will also reduce demand on and prolong the life of the tribe's existing conventional generators in the cogen plant. Next slide, please. So for some quick background on the housing power project, it's important to understand that the CICC owns and operates its own 6 megawatt cogeneration power plant, which powers an autonomous microgrid for the entire reservation. So our cogen plant also employs a 4 MVA battery UPS system, which has helped to maintain our record of 0 power interruptions over the last decade for the entire reservation. The microgrid powers the Colusa Casino Resort, tribal administration buildings, water treatment plants, a medical clinic, biodiesel shop, and several homes. The housing power project connects a total of 39 new loads to this existing microgrid. Next slide, please. And for some background on the solar canopy expansion project, the CICC owns an existing solar canopy I spoke about earlier. That one is rated for 336 kW AC, and that was constructed in 2014. And the expansion project brings the cogen's total solar capacity to just under 800 kilowatts AC. Next slide, please. Here are some photos of the housing power project's progress. So as of right now, all new infrastructure for this project is 100% installed. And all of the new loads are now being powered by the tribe's microgrid. Next slide, please. This is just an aerial photo showing the bulk of the new reservation. So all buildings in this photo are now powered by the Tribal Utility Authority instead of PG&E. At the bottom right is the daycare, and then there's a ring of homes that you can see. Some in the center also. There's a water treatment facility, and then the tribe's new baseball field. All of that, and in the back left, you'll see their main construction shop. So everything in this photo is now powered by the TUA, thanks to the DOE's help. Next slide, please. These are photos of the solar canopy expansion project's progress, and these new canopies on the left, the back 4 canopies are the new ones. They have been producing power since July of this year. And to the right, you can see the equipment pad for the new transformer, switchgear, vault, inverters, communications equipment, all sorts of stuff. All that is left to complete for this project is really just the asphalt striping, and that'll be done before the end of the year. Next slide, please. So for any questions about either of these projects, please feel free to reach out to me personally anytime, either via email or on my cell. Thank you for your time, and thanks again to the DOE for helping the CICC to fund these already successful projects.
Thank you so much, Ken. I think you did the reporting on the 2 projects in record time, and you've got some time to spare. So we'll just pass it on to Tom Allen. I hear he's got a very long presentation for us next. Tom, who is with MidTom, serves as the project technical contact for Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing, and he's going to talk about their project to install 54 kilowatts of solar PV systems to support 6 tribal facilities on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Tom, you are on.
I was teasing about being long. Good morning, everyone. Our project is Oglala Omashte, which is Oglala Sunshine. The symbol is the Lakota symbol for sun and earth. We'd like to thank the Department of next slide, please. We'd like to thank the Department of Energy, our first DOE grant ever for housing. The grant was an adventure in getting in and submitting, but worth it. And thanks to Grid Alternatives for all their expertise. We're funded under the Energy Infrastructure Deployment on Tribal Lands 2020. Next slide, please. This is the state of South Dakota. It shows where the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is. It's in the southwestern corner of South Dakota. A lot of the state maps show a quarter of the reservation, Bennett County, not as reservation, but we keep fighting with, not fighting with the government, but telling the government that the external boundaries of the reservation include Bennett County, even though it was a lot of ceded land. If you notice Rosebud, their reservation is actually the same size as Pine Ridge, but the state maps don't show it. So anyway, that is the Pine Ridge Reservation. The entire reservation shown was accepted as a promise zone by the USDA. So we are a promise zone. Next slide, please. The Oglala Sioux Lakota housing is a TDHE, Tribal Designated Housing Entity of the Oglala Lakota Nation or Oglala Sioux Tribe. Most of the reservation is grazing, rolling hills for grazing. Bennett County was homesteaded due to farmland. That's why there's a lot of ceded land. The government always gave the best land away right away. And then the rest of the reservation, or a lot of it, is the Badlands, including the Badlands National Park. I should have shown a picture since it's beautiful. And a lot of people, especially from Kyle, where I lived, lived in the Badlands. And during World War II, the government took the land away for a bombing range. And some of the people had horses, they had farms, ranches, and some of them didn't leave. And they finally left when they woke up in the morning and some of their cars had artillery shells in them. And that's a true story. Anyway, now it's part of the Badlands National Park, that area of the reservation. Next slide, please. The reservation is 3,468 square miles divided into 9 districts. It is 98 miles from Pine Ridge Village in the southwest to Wombly in the northeast. And Oglala Sioux Lakota housing has 17 clusters, and our houses are spread through the 9 districts. The districts are similar to states, and when we make decisions about where to put houses, we have to take we have to look at the political entities there. So it's like states saying, hey, we deserve this and that. The districts and the council people are elected from each district. So we have 17 clusters spread throughout the 9 districts. Next slide. Okay. Oglalas are the tribe of Red Cloud, American Horse, Little Wound, Bullberry, young man whose enemies are afraid of his horses. The cavalry always didn't translate names very well, as most tribes know. A lot of the people on the res now are called young men afraid of horse, but actually the full title is young man whose enemies are afraid of his horses. Population according to the HUD formula and the census is 17,508. The tribal estimate is 19,000 to 21,000. Tribal enrollment as of November 15th, on reservation 19,911, off reservation 20,661, total of 40,000. Although the enrollment number has jumped due to COVID and the relief efforts of the tribe, it's now a lot of people are enrolling their children, and so it's, I think, getting close to 50,000. And again, about half on the reservation, half off. Oglala Lakota County, which makes up about 60% of the reservation, was called the poorest county in America by USA Today in May of 2019. Next slide, please. Again, Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing is tribally designated housing entity of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. Mr. Ramon Barunner is the CEO. The HHS committee of the tribe is the board right now for Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing. And if you notice on top, I put DBA Oglala Lakota Housing Authority. The HHS committee of the tribe did vote to change the name, but we have to go through all the legal things to change it for real. Next slide, please. The mission, exercising our sovereignty and treaty rights, Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing will work with communities in a culturally appropriate manner to provide safe, sanitary, and affordable housing to OST members on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. We will efficiently utilize any and all resources, including those obligated and due us by the United States government. The primary goal is to provide housing, although secondarily, employment and economic development can be a benefit. But OSLH shall always use the most effective and efficient means to provide housing. Next slide, please. Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing is actually the oldest TDHE in the country. In 1960, Mr. Johnson Holy Rock went to DC and met with President Kennedy and some of the other people in Washington, and Oglala was the first TDHE. Our administration building is now named the Johnson Holy Rock Building. We managed 1,158 1937 Act low rent units, and I had 17 clusters before. It's 17 and 19. I do the statistics, and I still never know for sure, which is kind of crazy, but we have 201 Nahasda low rent units, which are units which were built after 2000. We have 75 USDA 515 units that were originally built for elderly, but I think they were opened up for others. 45 Title VI units. We received the first Title VI loan in South Dakota. We got a Rural Innovation Fund grant and built 9 units designed to be built for low maintenance and energy efficiency. We have 83 1937 Act mutual help units left on our formula, and we have built 45 Nahasda home ownership units. We just recently, we also have 20 HUD-VASH vouchers for veterans. We are using 7 of them in the Title VI units. We just received an IHBG competitive 20 grant to build 13 more houses, and that will allow us to use our 20 HUD-VASH units for veterans, which is great news. Next slide. Our past activities, we held a renewable energy session for housing and other reservation entities and staff. Thunder Valley Community Development came, the tribe came, and we wanted to say, okay, how do we proceed with solar development? HUD paid for it, and Godfrey Kahn sent 2 representatives, Brian Pearson and John Clancy, and they gave a great 2-day, it was a presentation, but it was give and take, and we kind of learned, this was in 2019, some of the overview of energy. Next slide, please. Okay, what we did previously, next slide. Grid Alternatives came in about 2 years ago and said, we have some money, we can do some solar if you cooperate with us. So we put a solar installation on one of our Rural Innovation Fund houses, and that's a picture of that. Based on this grant, a newer picture would show a solar installation on the other RIF house. The lady that lived in the one house, when we were doing the solar, she said, that's ugly. But when she got her first energy bill after it went into operation, she thought it was beautiful. Next slide, please. Okay, this is one of the Title VI units. We put them all over the reservation, but we put 7 of them in Pine Ridge. They are called governor's houses, which are built by prisoners at South Dakota Springfield Prison. Some people get mad because we're using prison labor and we don't use local labor. We really want to start designing houses and using local. We want to build them ourselves, or have contractors on the reservation build them. But these houses at the time, people made the decision that they were $45,000 basically for a 3-bedroom house, and you had to put it on a foundation and get the infrastructure. So that decision was made to use governor's houses, and they are a pretty well designed house. So we put solar, Grid Alternatives came in and put solar on 3 of our units. Next slide. Okay, the summary of our grant. Oglala Amash Day 2020 will provide 54.5 kilowatt DC of solar PV energy to 6 tribal buildings, including Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing Administration Building, which is the Johnson Holy Rock Building, 4 Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Homes, and 1 Rural Innovation Fund home. The project will lower electricity bills for tribal tenants and provide hands-on training to tribal employees and members of the local community. Next slide. I'm not going to read all this, but basically we want it to be sustainable and support tribal environmental and net zero energy goals. We want it to be affordable. We want it to use commercially available technologies with standard service warranties. We've had a number of entities that did wind generators, and the generators broke down, and a lot of them are sitting there unused. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we built would be repairable. Strategically integrated, the Oglala Sioux Tribe is working on a solar plan overall. Economic development, again, that could be part of the solar, excuse me, and cost effective. We'll get into the cost effective in a little while. Next slide. Participants, the Oglala Sioux Tribe is our overall controlling entity. They give us leases. They oversee regulations and rules. They allow us to put in for grants. Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing basically provided the houses, assisted with writing the grant. Nebraska Public Power District gave us permits to put solar on these houses. We put the houses in Pine Ridge Village because Nebraska Public Power District serves Pine Ridge Village. The rest of the reservation is served by Lake Creek Electric. The state of Nebraska has a net, anyway, a return policy. South Dakota doesn't, so that we figured it was most cost effective to do the solar in Pine Ridge Village right now. Grid Alternatives helped with the proposal and has completed the project. Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, I think, which is funded by Wells Fargo, provided the match, and HUD provided permission and technical assistance, et cetera, in terms of how we dealt with HUD homes and solar. Next slide. The project status: installations are complete on 1 Rural Innovation House, 4 HUD VASH houses, and the OSLH Johnson Holy Rock Administration Building. Next slide. Activities yet to be completed: drawdowns and payments, a year of monitoring until at least 12/22, which is when the grant ends, and quarterly reports. Next slide. Okay, lessons learned. We need to work politically to get better net metering or usage payback for solar energy, at least for low-income people. One of my nephews, whose uncle was the head of the local South Dakota, well, they were in the whole Midwest, Black Hills Energy. They're a gigantic corp. He's a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and I know him because of my nephew, but he was the CEO. And after he retired, I called him and said, "What's the issue with solar?" And he said, "Well, energy companies say that the cost of energy is not just usage, but also infrastructure, and it is unfair to have other consumers subsidize individual solar installations." especially since most people that do solar are well off. Well, he was telling me what the energy companies say, but we need to do a real concerted political effort to get the energy companies to do, number one, net metering, and also, at least for low income people, allow us to do cost effective solar. Next slide. Pilamayapelo, that's thank you. I'm open for questions. I'm sorry if I rushed, but that's it.
Thank you, Tom. I didn't have to sing the song to usher you off the straight at this stage today because we have plenty of time. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your next steps with these projects, especially reimbursing the tribes for expenses. Okay, next up we have Brian Atkins. Brian is the environmental director for Bishop Paiute, and he's going to talk about the solar program phase 4 to install about 67 kilowatt of solar PV on 19 grid-tie rooftop solar electric systems on homes for low-income families on the Bishop Paiute Reservation. You're on, Brian.
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Brian Atkins. I'm the Bishop Paiute Tribe Environmental Director here in Bishop, or on the Bishop Reservation. Next slide. The Bishop Paiute are the descendants of the Numu of the Owens Valley along the eastern Sierra of the Eastern California. The Aboriginal land of the tribe is generally in the Owens Valley area and the Mono Basins. Extends all the way up to Mono Lake and down into the Owens Valley, Owens Lake area. Our energy demand is typical of I think probably many reservations. We have homes, community governmental facilities, preschool. We have an education center, an after-school education center with a gym, health clinic that's run as a consortium. We have a cultural center, a casino, and domestic water pumping. Next slide. So here's a picture of where the reservation is located. It's, I believe, the 5th largest population-wise reservation in California. Approximately 2,000 population, 879 acres of trust land. We're located adjacent to the city of Bishop that you can see in the inset photo there on the right. Northern Owens Valley, as you can see in the photo, we're up kind of up against Nevada to the east and to the White Mountains in the east and the Sierras in the west. And it was created in 1938 through a land exchange with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And we have about a 80% low to moderate income, which made the project that I'm about to talk about ideal for the reservation here. Next slide, please. Back several years ago, in around 2015, we did a energy vision activity with NREL. They came out here and we went through a strategic energy plan. We created an energy vision, which we set aside this statement that we would try to preserve cultural traditions, the environment, economy, efficient use of resources, with the lofty goal of someday attaining energy self-sufficiency. Next slide. So as part of that effort, in 2015, we took a look at the single family home stock that we had, about 490. And of those 490, about 81%, as I said, were low income, met the low income qualification state programs. I believe it's on a county by county basis where the income is delineated, and about 400 of those homes, of those 480, were considered eligible for the program that I'm about to talk about. So part of this goal setting exercise, we decided by 2020, we would try to serve half of them. So half of the 400 is 200 homes. So that was kind of our goal at the start. Next slide, please. So this partnership that we created was really between the grid alternatives that we learned about through a US EPA, actually a US EPA tribal conference. We first learned about grid alternatives. We started a little partnership agreement with them, realizing that we had quite a bit of that the missions of both the tribe and grid aligned pretty well. Our office here, Environmental Management Office, there's an insignia there in the middle. The other big part of this that lined up really well is our tribe has like a lot of tribes have a TARO office, Tribal Employment Rights Office. So Grid Alternatives has a very big training component as one of their three kind of pillars of their program, and so that was the other part of our partnership, is working with our Tribal Employment Rights Office that does a lot of training. Next slide. So here's a little bit about Grid Alternatives. They're the nation's largest solar nonprofit. They have 12 regional offices. This information may be a little bit old. They had 28 megawatts of solar installed. So as I said before, our TARO office we have these overlapping missions, I guess you could say, between our TARO office and Grid. So it really worked well, the model that it was explained to us when we first started the project. And again, our environmental department, we have a mission in protecting the environment. So it really, and with our housing department, I think we got a lot of buy-in all across our tribal government with the way that their mission here, it worked. Next slide. So they function under a three pillar system here: people, planet, and employment. People, offsetting 80% of a tribal homeowner's electrical energy bill is a big motivating factor. The planet, of course, front and center these days with climate change. And reducing pollutants, becoming more self-sustainable, and employment, that training aspect, as I mentioned before, that hands-on solar job training for not only trainees that would come out and help with the initial parts of our project where they would just volunteer their time to get up on the roof and to work on the ground to do these putting these systems together. But also we built in an aspect where after they did this volunteer work, that they were eligible to work as a paid apprentice in the SPP portion of our project. Next slide. So here's kind of what each side provided here. Grid provides the outreach. They provide some of the initial training where we get together and help organize the tribal community, do some presentations, and then work with our TARO department, and they also help. One of the big things that they help with is the third-party inspection they bring in, because our tribe doesn't have a building department bringing in a third-party qualified electrical inspector that could give us the assurances that when we request interconnection, that we know that our systems are up to code. And of course, the tribe provides the MOU. They provide the trainees. They provide a lot of collaboration. That's what I do with the grants and the letters of support. Here's a picture of our tribal chairman at the time, Mervyn Hess, in the center, with some of past tribal chairmen and our Bishop Paiute Tribe at one of the Solar-thon events. Next slide. And then finally, they do outreach, training, installation. The installation typically happens in usually a day or even a half of a day. Some of our smaller units, some of our bigger units, 2 days for installation. They meet with the community, they meet with the homeowners, explain to them that their design, do before construction, go through contract signing, explain the warranties, and then the tribe provides the request for permission to operate to the utility. Next slide. This was our first phase through what was called the Sash Program. It was a program that investor-owned utility funded, and it basically at that point in time provided almost entirely the whole cost of the labor and the panels and the whole system. With that particular project, we started off, we did 14 training builds, and then the SPP builds, because we're in kind of a rural part of California, Grid uses local solar contractors as their to do their work. And with our SPP builds, we decided, because of the well, part of it because of the requirement with our TARO laws, and also because it was already built into the grid system, that we provided paid apprentice training through those SPP builds. So the tribal members that went through the training builds, that volunteered their time, were eligible to get paid basically under these SPP builds. So it was a nice, and they typically, the SPP builds would follow the training builds, and we've kind of continued that model all the way through our project here. So at the end of our phase 0, we completed 62 units, which was about 15% of our goal. This is a picture of our first actual build here, right here. Next slide. So our phase 1 was coincided with our first DOE grant, where we were able to fund 22 more builds, which were incidentally all training builds. 84, bringing us up to a total of 84 units. So we did about over 1,000 job site hours, and that brought us up to 20% of our goal. Here's 2 members of our the Dewey family here working on the roof. Next slide, please. Phase 2 was our next DOE award, 123 kilowatts, which we completed using the SPP builds. So the workforce trainees, paid workforce apprentices that were used in this project here were largely comprised of tribal members that went through the training builds in the phase 1. And that brought us up to 118, which was 30% back in 2017. Next slide. And then we, as I say, our training is a big part of this. We applied for and received a First Steps training grant that we use for training. We did a 3-phase training project where 8 interns applied and received classroom training on the reservation here, completed 5 rooftop installations in the summer 2018. Of those 8, 3 were selected to and offered a summer intern position in Riverside, California. 170 hours of training, and then worked down there for the summer. And a big part of that project was to secure housing for these 3 individuals in Riverside, and kind of help them, work, kind of make that transition. And at the end of that phase 2, 1 intern was selected for a 1-year fellowship in Riverside. And 2019, here's his picture below, Canyon Martinez, with in the right there with Cindy Corrales, who's the grid project lead. And so Canyon has gone on to work, find work and paid work in the solar industry in the LA area. So we consider that a success, that kind of bringing that from the very start to a career for him. Next slide. So just a slide showing some other training that we've, just an example of some of the training that we've done here on the reservation. We've done over 2,600 hours, I guess. Trained 60 Bishop tribal members. Next slide. And then, so here's just a snapshot of those 5 training builds, bringing us up to 123, which was 31%. Next slide. Which brings us, well, actually, then we had phase 3, another, looks like 40 installs, bringing us up to about 41% of our goal. Next slide. And it brings us up to our current project that we're working on now. That was 19 tribal homes, 67 kilowatt AC installed. So at the time that I did this slide, we had done 3 training builds. There's a picture of our tribal trainee, Courtney Taylor, right there on the right. I'm pleased to say that actually, as of today, we're just finishing our 19th build of the whole 19. We're just completing those out. Most of the activity for our SPP has been in the last couple weeks here. And a lot of these are smaller systems, so they go pretty fast. And we've employed, I think, the 2 SPP contractors employed 3 tribal trainees, one of which is you see here. So this was made possible by the generous grant funding from DOE. The total project cost was $332,000, which you see the match above there. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of one of the installations on Miss White's house here. Next slide. And here's a typical savings from DOE for here, estimated solar savings, and some of the environmental. Next slide. As you see that we shoot for 30 to 70% reduction, but most of the typical with our projects has been around 67 well, this particular one is typical of our project, so like 67%. So that's equivalent to 34 tons of CO2 over the lifetime of the installation. Next slide. So currently we're to date 182 we've installed after the end of today, and that will bring us to 46%. Now we've gone over our 2020 deadline, but we're still increasing, so we're moving towards the deadline even though we're past the 2020. We applied for one grant that we were not funded for, so it set us back for about a year. Next slide. 2020, 21, 22, we are switching gears using some funding through the ARPA that the tribe has received, some recovery funding, and of that 19 will be built, which by mid next year should push us over the 200 mark, which will be 50%. So we're looking forward to getting started on that very soon. Those next 19, and hopefully by next year we'll be at this time we'll be pleased to report that we've met our goal. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit old information. Phase 4, we did 3. This is when I did this, we had done 3 installs. Now we've done a total, instead of 166, we've done 182. And our kilowatt, instead of 554, we've done approximately 616. Next slide. So that's what that is. Next slide. And then next slide. And instead of 8,000, we're estimating that about 9,000 reduction of cumulative carbon over the life of the actual systems. Next slide. So available for any questions by email or phone or later after this talk. Lisa Castellone, who wasn't able to make it today, is our key partner at GRID. She's been very more than helpful and more instrumental in reaching out with the tribe, and just a great person. So I've been really lucky to have worked with her for on this project for so many years here. And really thanks to the DOE, great staff of the DOE Office of Energy, and everyone for attending the talk today, and just on hand if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Great progress on phase 4 of your continuing project. I want to thank you also to Tom and to Ken for sharing your stories and the successes, some of the lessons that you've learned, and I hope we'll hear about some more of those lessons in our questions. But I'm going to pass the floor to James Jensen. James is a great facilitator that you may be familiar with on our monthly webinar, so he'll help us with that. And James, I'll have to say, is also a wonderful project monitor if you're lucky enough to have him on some of your projects. James, I'm passing it over to you.
Thanks so much, Tweety. You're too kind with your compliments. I strive to live up to them, I guess. Yeah, we have plenty of time for questions, so please do submit any questions that you have, and we should have time to get to them. But let's get started with the ones that we have. So a question for you, Ken. With your microgrid, you said that over a decade you've had 0 power outages. Can you contrast that to what PG&E service in the area is like? How many outages might you have had, do you think, without your microgrid?
Yeah, hi. So in the last 10 years, I don't have great forecasting or trending from PG&E for that. What I do have is the trends that existed before the cogen was built. So the reservation is at the very end of a very weak circuit for PG&E, and they averaged over 40 power interruptions per year before the cogen was built. And the cogen was constructed in 2004, commissioned in 2005. So over 40 interruptions per year. Now, not necessarily what PG&E classifies as, a blackout. I think it requires several minutes of an outage in order to, classify it as a PG&E outage. But for us, we have a casino. So if there is a power interruption that lasts, 45 seconds, the damage is already done to the equipment, to customer confidence. All sorts of costs go into that. So it was an expensive ordeal for the tribe for many years, and that's what precipitated the exploration of building their own power plant. PG&E wasn't willing to invest money themselves. They offered for the tribe to spend tens of millions of dollars to upgrade service for the luxury of continuing to pay PG&E for their power. And so the tribe declined that offer and decided to build their own power plant. Now, from 2005 until 2011, so the first 6 years of the operation of the microgrid, we averaged about 5 power interruptions per year. And that's because we didn't have the UPS system. So 2011, we commissioned the battery UPS system, the cogen expansion, which added two 2-megawatt diesel backup generators to our system, the 4 MVA battery UPS, and a bunch of other smaller ancillary pieces of equipment. And since then, we also added 2 1-megawatt gas engines and some rooftop solar. So since 2011, we've had zero power interruptions. Now, as far as operating in the cogen goes, it's gotten exponentially more complex than it ever used to be with all of these backup systems. We still have the same number of equipment failures. Each gas engine averages about 40 shutdown alarms per year. We have 6 gas engines. So if you do the math, it's almost one every day. And in the past, without the UPS system, any one of those gas engine failures, since we run in island mode, isolated from the main grid, any one of those gas engine failures could have caused an outage for the casino and for the rest of the reservation. Now, every time a gas engine fails, the battery UPS system takes over up to 15 minutes of runtime. The diesels automatically fire up, carry the load, recharge the batteries for the UPS system, and buy us time to get the gas engine fixed back up online. So that's the very long-winded answer as to our record on power interruptions and how we got there.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that's very insightful and quite an accomplishment, really. 10 years without any power interruptions is great for any utility service, but particularly a small microgrid. I think it's a real accomplishment, and obviously a sign of all the investment that the tribe has put towards it. But that's really cool. Another question for you, Brian. Talking about the tribe's effort to expand, the service territory more broadly across the reservation, what issues did you have from a working with PG&E perspective? Like, did they make that transition easy or hard, or how did that relationship go? And then also, what challenges did you have within the Tribal Utility Authority building the skill set necessary to take on that role, expanded role?
Is that for Ken? For me?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's for Ken. I'm sorry, I said Brian. My fault.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no problem. So the first question was about dealing with PG&E. The initial conversations were a little awkward. Basically, I had a senior VP explain to me that they're not in the business of giving away their infrastructure. And so initially, when we first started, they're not in the business of giving up customers. Typically, they're dealing with people who want to expand, not take entire swaths of their domain away from them. And so it took a while to find the right people to talk to and explain what it was we were trying to do, who we were in the first place. So yeah, long story short, it was a challenge to get going. Once we got going, well, let me back up. So first, PG&E, our initial conversations, we wanted to purchase their infrastructure. We didn't want to have to spend all this money to go underground and refeed all of these loads with all new cabling. PG&E stuff was already there, and it was overhead, not ideal, but something that we thought we could manage. And by the end of it, after a long time of, honestly, these conversations go back 15 years, and it just never really went anywhere. And so they refused to give the infrastructure to us. The offer to sell was astronomical, just wasn't feasible. It was a ripoff, basically. And so that's when the tribe decided that they would try to go underground and refeed all of these loads from the microgrid and just bypass PG&E altogether. And so once it became clear to them that we were going to do it anyways, especially since the DOE was willing to help fund it, then they were a lot more accommodating. However, that being said, they still, they pulled, they're pulling now all of their infrastructure out. So they're spending, time and resources to remove, not just secondaries, but, all the primary overhead, lopping the poles off at the top, removing transformers, reeling up, miles of cables. So that was a little disappointing, but either way, we're connected now. So PG&E is, they have a long track record of being difficult to work with for our tribe. I'm assuming for many other customers as well, but eventually they kind of played ball to some degree. And then the second question, I don't remember what the second question was. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, my fault for combining two. So the second question is what challenges did the Tribal Utility Authority have taking on the expanded service territory? Did you need to acquire more skill sets and additional staffing, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Okay. So we basically, since all this started, we've added one employee. Before this started, we had a couple of different departments. Now they've been combined into what we call the Tribal Utility Authority. So that basically the formation of the TUA was precipitated by these projects. And it was a way to kind of centralize existing resources and utilize, existing employees to be able to create cross-training opportunities, put everybody under one umbrella. So we have the cogen department, which has been responsible for operating and maintaining just the cogen power plant. And then the electricians department, which in the past has only done electrical work for the tribe's residential and commercial properties. So by combining the two, basically we turned the existing electricians into, industrial utility level electricians. There's been a lot of training that's been happening, but we really haven't had to. It hasn't cost us any money in labor. It's just been a whole lot of cross training. So we have cogen operators now who are, electricians apprentices who are now able to go out and collect meter reads, troubleshoot out on the microgrid, as opposed to just specializing in, inside the cogen plant. And then we have electricians now who, instead of, just wiring up lights and switches, are learning a whole lot about medium voltage infrastructure and, transformer maintenance and, medium voltage switchgear maintenance and all sorts of stuff. So really, we added one new employee, and that was it. We basically just utilized what we already had.
Excellent. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate the insight on that. Really interesting project. So thank you. We don't have any further questions for you at this time, not that others might come in, but we'll move on to Tom, a question for you. How does the tribe educate or work with the community to support solar deployments, and have you seen any positive results from those efforts?
Basically, we had that workshop, and we haven't really done a lot more. There may be parts of the tribe that are doing it that I don't know about, so I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but unless we do the political in terms of really having a concerted effort to change some of the laws, right now solar isn't cost effective. It is, making green and helping the earth, of course. The only other solar installation that I'm aware of, large one on the reservation, is Keeley Radio, and they got a wind generator donated, and it never worked. And then they got a smaller wind generator that helped, and then they put a smaller solar installation, and they thought it was cutting half their electric bills, but the monitoring wasn't really done. And then they called me to help. They needed a little bit more money to make a bigger solar installation, so we went to USDA. So they have, and I don't know the numbers, but theoretically they have a wind and solar installation that should generate all of their electricity. I don't think at this point they're sure of if they went off the grid, if that would actually do it. But right now they're in the process of looking at their savings, and it's nothing like they thought they would get. Now they're in Porcupine, so they're on Lake Creek. So right now the economic impetus is not there. The green impetus, yes. And I work with Oglala Lakota College too, and we've been looking at their buildings. But right now, we just really do need to make a greater effort to, and hopefully with this infrastructure bill, et cetera, but even if the cost of installation comes down, we need to deal with that return issue.
Understood. Thanks, Tom. A question for you, Brian. It looks like you're, reaching your goal of the 200 homes installed with solar in the near term. What's the next? What's next? What are your follow-on plans?
Well, the Sash 2 DAC, or the DAC Sash, actually has replaced Sash 2 here in California, which it's just another 50% match type of funding from the investor-owned utility through the California Energy Commission. So we'll be looking at that to continue enrollment of tribal members. As we get the other thing that we're also looking at is there are to provide incentives for tribal homeowners that are above the income eligible for this low income program. So that's one of the things we're looking at, working with our housing department and either providing some low income loans coupled with maybe some new funding that's coming out of this, some of these new federal funding initiatives potentially. The other thing is we're really starting to look at kind of getting into the community buildings. We've done a few things on our elders and our gas station, but we still have quite a few of our community buildings that don't have any renewable energy. So that's one of the things that we're taking notes, as we look at attend some of these presentations from DOE. There's been some really nice microgrid projects and like solar carport type of projects that I think that would be very useful for our community. So those are the sort of things, electric vehicle charging stations, and of course weatherization and energy efficiency.
Thanks, Brian. We got one last question here, and unless others come in, we'll be done with questions after this. Another question for Brian, and that is, so you've done solar projects on rooftops, residential rooftops for approximately 6 years now. Have there been any, can you contrast the original projects versus the latest ones? Are there any notable major differences or kind of lessons learned that have made the later projects more streamlined or effective?
So early versus late, kind of our initial projects, kind of contrasting the two.
Yeah.
Like lessons learned. I guess, when we first started our project, there was a lot of, no one really knew what this kind of, because we hadn't done one before, there was a lot, kind of like some reticence on how exactly this would work, especially with the volunteer training. We quickly overcame that, and we, in our first few builds, we did get quite a few volunteer trainees that worked. Basically, they get lunch, that the homeowner gives them lunch, and there's no payment. We worked on to the paid apprentice program. As far as looking at our most recent projects, one thing we've noticed is that initial interest, we've kind of, the people that have really interested in solar as a career come out, they've kind of already done some of the training. They've come out and done the work, and now we're having to reach out a little bit more. Maybe it's because of the pandemic, maybe it's because of just I'm not sure, but we have to look a little bit harder to try to find the training part of it, I think, but as things change and renewable energy becomes more front and center with all of these initiatives coming up, I'm hoping that the interest will increase more as the costs come down, more people are getting solar. But other than that, it's pretty much been pretty consistent. I think the quality has been consistent. We've been consistently passing our inspections where we have, let's say, a correction. Grid will come back and quickly correct, and make good on whatever. And so, the workmanship has stayed pretty high and pretty consistent, I'd say, over the whole project. And I think the community, the input that I've got from the community, some people have been pleasantly surprised where they even have less of electric bill than they were expecting, because we're net metered, and so some almost have no bill, and so that's been really good, because the price of electricity is pretty high here. So that's one of the things I think it helps affect people's bottom line, with the economics. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So with that, we're done with questions. So I'll pass it back to Tweety to close out the session.
Thanks, James. And I want to thank you all, to our presenters, Tom, Ken, Brian, for telling us about your projects, as well as answering all the questions that we have about them. This concludes this session 4. The next session will be session 5. And if I want to mention that the presentations will be posted in a few days, and the recording will be available in the next week or two. If you are planning on attending the next session, session 5, you will need to join using the link and call-in number that was provided in the calendar invitation you received when you register for that session. And if you have not registered for that session, you would like to, you can go to our website. There's a picture of Brian, who's a poster recipient for the program review, and you click on that, you'll see the agenda, and you can register for any of the sessions today, as well as the next few days. And so this concludes session 4. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.